The 1970 FIFA World Cup is a story of redemption. A World Cup where Pelé and Brazil went in as underdogs with little support, but transformed into champions and cemented their legacy as one of the greatest teams of all time. But why was so little expected of them? How did they turn their fortunes around? This is how Brazil won the 9th edition of the FIFA World Cup and became champions for the 3rd time. To understand why little chance was given to Pelé and Brazil, you must go back to the 1962 and 1966 World Cups. Despite Brazil empathetically winning the 1962 FIFA World Cup, it was a disappointing campaign for Pelé. He got injured in the second game and missed the rest of the tournament. Injury would plague Pelé in the 1966 edition, but for more violent reasons. Brazil had hoped to win their 3rd World Cup in a row, but instead were dumped out in the first round as they fell victim to the physical approach of the European sides. Pelé took the brunt of the punishment as he was carried off the field in tears against Portugal. Pelé was so angry at his treatment that he vowed to never play in a World Cup again, and he retired from the national team. Pelé would go on to say, "Getting knocked out of the World Cup in England was the saddest moment of my life." Going into the 1970 World Cup in Mexico, there was little belief that Brazil could win. Their build-up had been tumultuous. Brazil had changed coaches 5 times in just 2 years. Brazilian experts believed their brand of attacking football had become obsolete. The first sign of Brazilian redemption came with the hiring of João Saldanha as coach in February 1969. A charismatic and outspoken man who had gained recognition as a football commentator and journalist. He helped guide Brazil through qualifying with a perfect 6 wins from 6 games. Shockingly, just 3 months before the tournament, Saldanha was sacked by Brazilian President General Médici after Saldanha publicly criticised him by saying, "I don't pick his cabinet and he doesn't pick the team." Mário Zagallo was chosen as coach. An astute tactician, he focused on getting a balanced side that could withstand the physicality of the Europeans but also play with Brazilian flair. The team played in a fluid 4-3-3 formation that switched to a 4-2-4 when attacking. Centre-forward Tostão led from the front and stretched defences. Pelé played as a number 10 and exploited any free space. Jairzinho and Rivelino played on the wings and dribbled past players at will. Gerson and Clodoaldo focused on defence in central midfield but could attack when required. Despite this, Brazilian fans were not confident. Brazil was drawn into a challenging group which contained reigning champions England and tough European sides Romania and Czechoslovakia. Brazilian media expected them to go out in the first round. Before moving on to the main tournament, I would appreciate a like, subscribe and hit that notification bell. I will continue this series with the 1974 World Cup in 2 weeks. Also, stay tuned until the end where I will go over notable stats from the tournament. Brazil arrived in Mexico 32 days before the World Cup started. This led Zagallo to proclaim Brazil would be the first to arrive and the last to leave. Brazil opened their campaign against the Czechs on the 3rd of June. They suffered an early setback as Petros opened the scoring after just 11 minutes. He dribbled past the Brazilian defence and fired into the roof of the net. Despite conceding early, Brazil dominated the game and equalised just 13 minutes later. Rivelino scored from a free kick that Ivo Victor failed to parry. In the 59th minute, Pelé ran onto a long ball and beautifully volleyed into the far corner. The 3rd goal in the 61st minute was identical, except Jairzinho was the scorer. In the 83rd minute, Jairzinho would score one of the best goals of the World Cup. He received the ball from 40 yards out and proceeded to dribble past 3 defenders before firing low into the bottom corner. Brazil had won 4-1. On the 7th of June, Brazil faced reigning world champions England in a highly anticipated encounter. Due to this, FIA scheduled a lunchtime kickoff so Europeans could watch the game. This was the first World Cup to be broadcast globally. Due to the kickoff time, the heat was almost unbearable and peaked at 36.6 degrees Celsius. Brazilian media went into the game pessimistic, whereas English media were almost arrogant. Despite only winning their opening game 1-0, they focused on the poor Brazilian defence. The Daily Mirror's Ken Jones ridiculed Brazil's schoolboy marking. They had misunderstood Brazilian tactics. They were not looking to man-mark, but instead adopted zonal marking. Zagallo would later say, "If we had gone with high-pressure marking, then by the second half we would have run out of gas." So we saved our energy and dropped back, and then when we won possession, the technical quality of our team stood out. Brazil started the game strongly and exploited England's man-marking approach as Tostão dragged defenders away to create more space for others. Despite this, England also looked dangerous and had a couple of good efforts at goal. The best chance of the first half came for Brazil. Jairzinho latched onto a ball on the right wing and crossed the ball to Pelé, who rose and delivered a perfect low header into the bottom corner. But in one of the most iconic saves of all time, Gordon Banks somehow ran and dove right across the goal to tip the ball over. Pelé would later say, "I scored, but Banks saved it." In the second half, the heat and man-marking approach seemed to take its toll on England. The Brazilians started to find more space and create more chances. In the 59th minute, the deadlock was finally broken. Pelé received the ball in the box from a cross which he controlled beautifully. Then, as time seemed to stand still for him, despite being surrounded by 3 England defenders, he calmly passed to Jairzinho, who fired the ball into the top corner. England would push for the equaliser and have numerous chances, including hitting the crossbar, but Brazil would hold on for the 1-0 win. In a now famous image, Pelé and Bobby Moore exchanged shirts after the game. Both teams walked away with full respect for each other. It was a match that both nations considered the final that never was. Brazil won the group after beating Romania 3-2 in a surprisingly competitive affair. Pelé scored twice, including a free kick, and Jairzinho scored for the 3rd game in a row. In the quarter-final, Brazil was drawn against Peru, who had finished runners-up to West Germany in Group 4. The match ended up being one of the best of the tournament. From start to end, both teams attacked and pushed to score goals. However, Brazil would prove to be more clinical. They got off to a flying start as Rivelino and Tostão scored within 15 minutes. Gallardo would make it 2-1 from an acute angle in the 28th minute. In the 52nd minute, Tostão would make it 3-1 with a tap-in from a Pelé assist. Peru would make it 3-2, but finally, Jairzinho confirmed the 4-2 win in the 75th minute. In the semi-final, Brazil would face their 1950 World Cup final nemesis Uruguay. In that final, Uruguay had broken Brazilian dreams of a first World Cup win at home. Brazilian fans went into the game full of nerves, as that defeat had left a deep psychological wound. The defeat is referred to as the Phantom of 50 to this day. Initially, it seemed Brazilian fears were justified as Uruguayan winger 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐿 scored after just 19 minutes. He scored from a tight angle after Brazil gave the ball away needlessly. Brazil would push for the equaliser, and after 44 minutes, Clodoaldo would finally capitalise for Brazil. He played a 1-2 with Tostão before firing into the far corner. The goal seemed to free Brazil, who dominated the second half. In the 76th minute, Jairzinho ran onto a wonderful through ball from Tostão, who then stroked the ball into the net and gave Brazil the lead. In the 89th minute, Rivelino secured the win after striking from the edge of the box after Pelé laid the ball off to him. Brazil was in the World Cup final for the 3rd time in 4 tournaments. The final was played on the 21st of June in Mexico City between Brazil and Italy. The Italians had grown as the tournament went on. They finished top of their group with 1 win and 2 draws, scoring just 1 goal but conceding none. However, they had exploded into life in the knockout stages. They thrashed hosts Mexico 4-1 and then beat Germany 4-3 in the dubbed Game of the Century in the quarterfinals and semi-finals respectively. This final was the first time 2 world champions had met. It was also the final to decide who would become the first 3-time champion and would get to keep the Jules Rimet trophy. Brazil started the final well and dominated until the end. After just 18 minutes, Rivelino received the ball from a throw-in and crossed the ball into the box with his first touch. Pelé leapt and seemed to float in the air before powerfully heading Brazil into the lead. It was Brazil's 100th goal in the World Cup. Despite Brazil's dominance in the 37th minute, Italy managed to level the game after a catalogue of mistakes from the Brazilian defence. They first gave the ball away after trying a backheel pass that was intercepted, and then failed to clear the ball as 𝐵oninchenho rolled the ball into an empty net. In the second half, Brazil's firepower and creativity proved far too much for the Italians' defensive approach. In the 66th minute, 𝐬𝐮𝐻 opened the floodgates with a fantastic strike from outside the box to give Brazil the lead. Just 5 minutes later, Jairzinho scrambled in a tap-in after Pelé headed down a long ball from 𝐬𝐮𝐻 to make it 3-1. In the 86th minute, Brazil scored a fourth goal that would go down as one of the greatest goals in the history of the World Cup. It was a fantastic team goal where 7 of the Brazilian players touched the ball, including Tostão, Brito, Clodoaldo, Pelé, 𝐤𝐿, Rivelino and Carlos Alberto. Clodoaldo was instrumental as he dribbled past 4 Italian defenders in the move. Pelé would get the assist as he received the ball on the edge of the box, passed out wide on the right to Carlos Alberto without even looking, who ran onto it and fired it into the bottom corner. Brazil were world champions for the 3rd time. This made them the most successful team, and they remain so until today. The redemption for Pelé and Brazil after their disastrous 1966 World Cup had been completed. Notable stats from the tournament include German Gerd Müller finished top scorer with 10 goals. Jairzinho became the first player to ever score in all matches. Brazil finished top scorer with 19 goals. They conceded 7. 95 goals were scored in 32 matches, 2.97 per match. No World Cup has averaged as high since. This was the first World Cup broadcast globally and in colour. This added to its status as an iconic World Cup. Well, there you have it. That was the story of how Brazil won the 1970 FIFA World Cup. If you would like to know more about the 1974 edition, then please subscribe and hit that notification bell.